So I wanted to give you guys my impression of these Prime towers so far. And I've had these for about 2 months now. And I've got to say, I can't really find anything wrong with them. You know, I've been watching a lot of stuff from Dr. Floyd Toole, who is a major proponent of dual subwoofers. And so obviously I've really enjoyed watching his stuff and things like that. And he touched on a point, something called psychoacoustics, where they would have these giant speakers behind a curtain, and then they would switch them out, and they'd have all these listeners go in and, you know, determine who could hear the best and what sounded, who could really determine whether they were listening to garbage or something good. And found some interesting results. One of which is that reviewers like myself are maybe not the most reliable, but I digress. What I found is that, you know, I experienced that in my own house. A friend of mine loaned me some really large towers, kind of make these towers look small. And prior to that, I had bookshelves. And so I went from the bookshelves to those bigger towers. And I kind of experienced a little bit of that psychoacoustic thing. And for me, I just cocked my head. Like, really? This is, you know, I expected something so dramatic from going to, you know, a small bookshelf speaker up into a large, you know, major speaker. And so what I found was that I really couldn't discern that much of a difference between the small bookshelf and the very large tower. So why am I talking about that? Well, I went from the very large tower to these smaller towers. These are considerably smaller than the other towers I had. And, you know, it kind of surprised me. I didn't really look at the specs that much before they sent them out. But, you know, granted, I like the smaller look. It's not as intrusive, okay? But what I heard was something I did not expect. The sound that comes out of these is so clear and very, I don't know, there's no ear fatigue, anything like that. Overall, I'm finding a tough time finding something wrong. And I guess that is kind of the point, the psychoacoustics. These aren't massive, monstrous towers. They are very, I don't know, reasonable looking. But these things are really designed pretty well. They go for $500 a piece for the oak, and I think it's $600 for the piano gloss. You know, don't take me at my word for that. But, you know, so they're not crazy priced towers. They're very economical. And what I've noticed is that the sound that comes out of them is really quite impressive. You know, and again, going back to Floyd Toole, maybe I'm not the person to take advice from, right? But for me, it was a major difference. And so now, who knows, had someone had been more impressed by the psychoacoustics of the larger tower, may have been like, well, I like that one better. For me, it was, you know, I didn't notice that much of a difference going from a $300 bookshelf to a $1,500 tower. That's maddening. At least I would have been mad myself. But in plugging these in, it was just like, wow, this is really good. And then they broke in after about, you know, 3 weeks, and they really started to open up. You know, it's like the new guy at work who's, you know, all kind of tense, just trying to get things done, really efficient, but, you know, just kind of rigid because they're not quite comfortable. And then after a while, they just kind of get used to it and everything just works out really well. Well, kind of the same thing. You know, when they first got here, they, you know, definitely not bad sounding, but, you know, you could tell they were brand new. And then as about, you know, 2-3 weeks, somewhere in there, wow, it just really started to open up. And, you know, people wonder, is that a real thing? I noticed it. For me, it was pretty substantial. It made a big difference to me. So, but anyway, you know, back to these drivers, these towers, you know, they're 3.5 way crossover. And so the way it works is, you know, you got your tweeter there, and then you got the mid-range, and then the two woofers underneath, they have their own separate cabinets. Okay, so they don't, you know, one does not interfere with the other. Okay, so the bottom woofer has its own cabinet, and the middle woofer has its own cabinet, and it's completely blocked off from the mid-range. And so there's no interaction there, so it's not muddying up anything. You don't have any turbulence going on inside the cabinet itself that's affecting other things, which is a smart design. But what they do is the crossover for the top woofer is a little bit different than the crossover at the bottom woofer. So the two woofers are not just for the sake of having two. They actually produce a little bit different sound out of each one. And so it's all very, I don't know, it all has purpose. And even the baffles, they're angled a little bit. And I mean, I'm not a speaker designer, but I can hear what they did. It sounds really good. They're by the way, these are ported on the back. They have, port on for each woofer. So, but anyway, my thoughts so far is that these are just really impressive for the price. Now I'm not against getting bookshelves. They have the Prime bookshelf series. I think are real good, and Prime Center is part of that series. But if you're going to go tower, I think these are absolutely worth checking out. And they do have the 45 days thing where you listen free, so it's free shipping and all that. If you get them out and you plug them in, and you're not super wild about them, you can send them back. It doesn't cost you a dime to do that, so that's pretty cool. But in terms, I can see where the money went on these. A lot of times you can spend good money on something and not really be able to hear the difference. You know what I mean? Not, well, what did I really spend my money on here? And that happens, and you get stuff, and then you lie to yourself for a while, trying to convince yourself that you got something good, and then after a while you just can't lie to yourself anymore, and it's frustrating. That happens. But with these, I have not found anything where I would feel that way. So these are doing pretty good. I like them because they're unassuming. They're not these massive things. That's great for psychoacoustics. That's great for giving you that impression of this huge sound stage coming at you. But I don't know, if you're over that, you don't really need that, and you just want something that sounds good, this is a great option. And another thing I'll say about these is they're scalable. I run a 95 watt amplifier right there. Okay, 95 watts per channel, and it's a Denon X2000. It's not the top of the line. It's just a good AVR. Okay, it's not the best in the world. You can run a lot more power than what that thing puts out, but these sound good with that. I don't need a bigger amplifier to make these sound good. Now, will these take a bigger amplifier? Yeah, all day long. You can run quite a bit of power to these, and they'll handle it. And and that's another thing I noticed about these over the bigger tower, is that these handle bass a lot better than the other towers. Which doesn't surprise me. Coming from SVS, they started in bass. That's where they earned their name. That's where they earned their reputation, was in bass. So it's not a shock to me that they've got the bass figured out. But anyway, guys, that's just my short impression. Yeah, going into almost 9 minutes now, so that's my short video. But I think they're pretty good. I'll be doing a final review later on once I feel I've done pretty good. But I kind of feel like I'm out of my league a little bit on doing these, because they're good. So hopefully I'm not doing them a disservice. But so far with them, I'm really happy with them, and I'll let you guys know my final thoughts a little bit later down the road. So thanks for watching, and please subscribe.